In this video, I will be doing a challenge I have thought of where I will make a flag using only textual elements. I will also cover the role of text as well as what I think is an underappreciation of the calligraphic art in its relation to vexillography. I will be using a real-world national flag, specifically the flag of Bosnia and Herzegovina. First, I'd like to note that I personally do not like this flag. Why? Well, aesthetically speaking, it is solid, honestly. However, it does a very poor job, in my opinion, at something that is the most critical for flags, that is, representation. Uh, This flag just makes it look like Bosnia and Herzegovina is a EU NATO colony, or at least that it should be. Now, there are already flags in the real world that use only textual elements, or almost only textual elements, like this Woodbridge flag. This is a real flag. I'm not kidding. And obviously, that is a very poor use of text in a flag. However, I will not be making a flag like this because I think I can do better, or at least try, because obviously it's quite difficult to make a flag with only textual elements. I will give myself one bit of leeway though, in that I will make the background black. Why? Because potentially the flag from afar could look too much like the flag of surrender, and distinctiveness on a flag is basically universally agreed upon principle, and I agree with it as well in vexillography. First, I put on just whatever, the letter B. Afterwards, I make the ratio 1 to 2. The reason for that is because most flags are around that ratio, aka they're wider than they're long, and there's no reason for this to be different. And I put in BIH because Bosnia and Herzegovina, but obviously that is unsatisfactory. As I said, I will not end here. I introduce a Cyrillic letter B in order to represent the fact that two scripts are used in Bosnia, namely Uk Cyrillic and Gai's a Latin script. So yeah, it's still the same shtick though. Then I change it to have some symmetry and that it can be read from both ways. Then I scrap that and just decide that it's Cyrillic B on the left and Latinic BIH on the right. But that leaves empty space that I don't like. So I make it like I move the H's basically. Then from a distance that looks, yeah, okay. Then I just make the eyes in the middle bigger, and basically conceptually this is the best I could think of. But it does not end here, because I was talking to someone on Discord about this, and they gave as a me their proposal and just says the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosniak Serbs, and Croats. And I realized that I don't have to restrict myself to just the country name. That was really dumb. The main issue in the first place was that I needed to make it like this so it doesn't get confused with anything else. And not only that, the letters can really represent anything, just like uh, symbols, except here it's actually even more abstract. Now, unfortunately, that means the flag is not necessarily easy to understand, but otherwise it wouldn't be meaningful and not really relatable and would be probably less memorable. So I go on another conceptual route for this flag, which ends up a lot better, at least I think so, aesthetically. And the reason why it would be less relatable, because it would be just words, and no one wants to like read a flag for that long, and of course they're not as relatable as specific letter shapes, because something that just constantly said maybe should not be on a flag, because again a flag is supposed to be distinctive, and I think that it extends into this sphere too. And of course we achieve peak distinctiveness text-wise through calligraphy. So I had a calligraphic bee and I think it looks pretty, it's well done. But it can't exactly end there. So I had a name check. Big, but it doesn't quite fit. Now, this is something to keep in mind. Having two different fonts does not really go well. Because unless it's really somehow significant, like there would be maybe like 5 exceptions. Just that's bull. Okay, it doesn't mean anything. I'm just saying how I can't see it necessarily being used, so I decide for something else. So I guess BS free. So why free? Because the free constitutional folks of Bosnia. Now that's a whole other issue on it and on of itself, like with the Sejdic and Finci versus Bosnia and Herzegovina case, and not really democratic and excludes certain poor groups, but let's not get into that. That's not the point. It's just a flag. Well, maybe a flag. It's definitely a banner, but who really knows if it's a flag if it only uses text, right? And numbers, yeah, you can use numbers too. So, okay, and I'm no calligrapher, so I just choose these because they all had a relatively similar style. Look good. This is visible from a distance too, but I'm not sure why we just use BS. Come on, it reads like a code too much. I forgot to mention S is for Sarajevo, because that is the capital, and BS is also Bosnia. Now, that doesn't represent Herzegovina, but neither does the current flag, so it's not the point. However, we triple BS. Okay, that sounds funny, but remember, I have noticed something, like for example on the R Vexillology subreddit, where there was a redesign of the Nepali flag, and it has like a subtle lettering that is ridiculous because a flag is meant to represent a country or whatever for itself, not for anyone else. So that is ridiculous and quite frankly egocentric. So again, this calligraphy is also not particular to Bosnia. I will get into that now. Why this? Why this? Well, the main calligraphic traditions in Bosnia for most of history were the Arabic script and the Bosnian Cyrillic script. The problem with the Arvatica, the Croatian Cyrillic, however you want to call it. So the problem with that is that it's not really used anymore, as well as the Arabic script, and they have religious connotations. Kind of have to be careful here because there are three religions, so you should either represent them all on the flag or don't represent them. So just something neutral. The landscape, which is introduced relatively recently, and it can be a new symbology to relate to. Now, of course, this is all a bit tongue-in-cheek. I don't seriously propose it to be a flag or anything. I'm just explaining my thought process behind it. Try to fit into the constraints of this challenge. And so 3 times represents 3 religions and 3 constitutive folks again. But again, still you can use numbers, sure. I just don't like how it was used. And so what I did is I added, well, the Independence Day of Bosnia, the 1st of March, 1992, and that. And so we have the space filled, which is honestly with text only. I observed that you kind of have to do that because text provides a lot less detail than graphics, of course. And there is also a potential other design which it doesn't fill the far side of the fly or the hoist, just the top and the bottom. I personally prefer the one that fills it all, but an argument can be made for the other one too because they all flow in the same way, aka from hoist to the fly, which is also how in Western flexography usually should be, but that's something else. Okay, and to additionally make a comment on why I'm not using the Cyrillic script used in medieval Bosnia, let's just call it that, is because while it is gaining popularity and there are flags that use very ancient scripts that aren't even used anymore for the flags and they look good, the problem is that this can gain who knows what connotation. That's also something you have to take into account. You know how in regular vexillography it's not too advised that you should put elements that are really specific to the contemporary era because in the future the flag might have to be unnecessarily redesigned because no one really knows what that is anymore or what the context of it is. It's kind of like that with text, except it can be worse, like a lot of modern fonts, like this classic fonts and this calligraphic letters that shows that the perception stayed the same, just formal, elegant, something like that. However, with newer fonts, like probably won't happen, but let's stay on the safe side so that it doesn't get eventually associated with something, and especially not the Cyrillic script used in medieval Bosnia, because, well, it's getting association to some certain nationalistic groups, which I'm not necessarily against that. Like, okay, like I'm not here to give my political views. I mean, I'm not necessarily for it either. Okay, I'm just trying to be a centrist here because not political view. But this the flag of Bosnia is not supposed to be like that. So can't have that either. And as a final note, legibility plays a role in this too. So that flag where the the numbers flow along with the text, that's fine because it has the same flow, that looks good. However, when you flip it, remember, flags are not static. They are in the air, and wind affects them, and no wind affects them too. So when it's reversed, the problem is, of course, that you get a different date, which is not good. However, you can fix that with making the reverse of the flag more appropriate, aka copy paste it, so that something like that doesn't happen, aka mirror it. In conclusion, did I succeed in the challenge? Well, maybe the real question is not if I succeeded, but if I expanded my perspective. I failed. I obviously failed. There's actually no amazing unexplored avenue. Making flags just with text. Shocking. Not. I mean, if you can think of something better, go ahead, go ahead. But the point of this is that sometimes you need to break all the rules of of whatever and see where it will get you. Except in games, that don't break rules in games. Come on, because in these arts and crafts and a lot of stuff actually, except games, it is important to expand our ways of thinking, and more importantly, it was just fun. Okay, it was just fun to ramble on like a dumb nerd about this topic and just design these relatively easy flags, banners, okay, whatever you want to call them, and it brings more attention to the fact that while they don't look good, does look horrendous. I think, at least, looked from the constraints, and more importantly, I want to bring attention to the fact that text can be used in flags as well as calligraphy, and that it is not something to be skewed. And recently, with the mass popularization of vexillology, if that, on the internet, people reading just good flag, bad flag, they say, oh, you can't have text ever, never, no, except you can, okay? Okay, and there are many vexillographical traditions which have text on flags, and that's fine. Why wouldn't they? Who is anyone to force something else? And even in Europe, in the West, sometimes text is used. As long as it is good. And is a good representation, it is fine. However, this video does not do this topic full justice, so in the comments I will be leaving a link to an excellent video exactly on the topic of text on flags. And it doesn't cover calligraphy, but does cover text.